The Earth is in danger and we have but one episode to fix everything. It's Dragon Ball Dissection December, which is coming to an end. Somehow I've managed to get to the last video without completely losing my sanity. I only managed to lose my voice and that came back. The things we do for love. It's the last installment of my month-long Dragon Ball Dissection Marathon, and that brings us to the finale of the Baby arc. Baby has finally been killed, but disaster has not been averted. Since Baby used the Dragon Balls without them first being returned to their resting place, not only did the countdown to Earth's destruction not stop, the Dragon Balls have now scattered into space all over again, leaving but 2 weeks until the Earth explodes. There's simply not enough time for another Dragon Balls in space adventure. Plus, it really wasn't received all that well the first time. It puts the heroes in a bit of an awkward situation when characters like Bluma come back to their senses and demand to return home. When Goku says they can't actually do that, Chi-Chi bursts in convinced that Goku is going to run off with another girl. It can't be Toei Chi-Chi without unnecessary histrionics. At least these are vulnerably relatable rather than insufferable. Still, run off with a girl? Has she ever actually met Goku? If he did, it would only be because she fights better than her. Just like at the end of the Frieza arc, Vegeta comes up with a plan. They have this whole other planet that some people have already migrated to. Why don't they just move everyone on Earth to planet Sufru? Between giant spaceships and at least a couple of people who can teleport, this should be doable. Goku commends Vegeta's quick thinking. Vegeta wryly comments that as a Saiyan, he's used to moving planets of people around. Ha ha ha! Memories of genocide and forced relocation are fun. Maybe Baby was right about you people. In all seriousness though, it is incredibly satisfying to see an entire episode of the Dragon Team at their best. They have the power, knowledge, and resources to avert a catastrophe. That makes it their responsibility to fix, as well as simply being in their best interest. These characters don't have to be the Justice League for that to be the most logical course of action for them to take. By this point, I wouldn't be surprised if Toriyama's Goku would just say, "But it's too exciting to miss out! I want to test my abilities to see if I can tank an exploding planet! After everybody's skin melts off in an excruciatingly agonizing death, we can just wish them back with the Dragon Balls, if I actually remember to do that." But no, here we have a coordinated, heartwarming effort to get every last living creature to safety. They once again enlist Mr. Satan to help spread the word. Everyone else wears Mr. Satan pins to identify them as helpers. Well, everyone except for Vegeta. Kaioshin gets to confuse me in his inconsistency as to whether or not he needs to use the Goku fingers thing to teleport. And we get lots of silent cameos from familiar faces. Also, I love how Pan comes up to Goku's waist in this episode, while in the last episode she was barely bigger than his kneecap. I hadn't really thought of this before, but if this planet is an exact recreation of the original planet Plant, isn't that planet supposed to have gravity 10 times that of Earth? All these Earthlings seem to be getting along far better than expected. Well, maybe it wasn't the laxatives making them double over. Thanks for reminding me of that, Rhino Banky. Thanks for reminding me of that, Reno Banky. Thanks for reminding me of that, Reno Bank. Thanks for reminding me of that, Rhino Bank. That's gotta be every combination, right? While this is all wholesome, there needs to be some degree of drama, and that's where Dola comes in. Dola is some stupid little farm boy with a cute little stupid dog. I accidentally mistyped that last sentence as some stupid little farm, which is actually correct too, as that's what the farm is named. Naturally, while his family is evacuating, Dola and Go wander off and are left behind on the flesh-eating hellscape. Now, I can forgive all that on account of him being a little kid. The reason I call him stupid is his response to the situation. "Where did everybody go?" Yeah, where did everybody go? I just can't fathom where all these people went when I was literally about to hop on a spaceship. I don't care if you are 5, Dola, there's no excuse for you missing the memo here. And somehow I have a terrible feeling that me having a little bit of fun at the expense of a character I didn't think anybody remembered existed is going to result in lots of offended comments from the newly formed Dola fan club. I'm going to be mercilessly child-splained. Children's brains haven't developed all the way, and kids wander off all the time. Don't you know that? Why are you being so unfair? Anyway, Dola's stupid parents finally notice he's missing after they're already in space, so Goku heads off to find him. Thankfully, though, someone else has already stopped Dola and Go from being prematurely Pompeyed, and that is, to everyone's shock, Piccolo. Yeah, remember him? Did you even realize he was still alive? Well, I guess technically he'd have to be. Goku doesn't have time to question this, but before he can teleport everyone out, he runs out of power and turns back into a kid. But then Piccolo says one of my favorite lines. Son, you are Son Goku. There isn't anything that Son Goku cannot do. That's so wonderful, it almost makes me overlook that Piccolo does yet another annoying ki transfer. And it's so momentous that even the child Goku can teleport. But Piccolo doesn't. He just stops himself from being teleported somehow. As the harpsichord music plays, Piccolo reaches out telepathically to Gohan to explain what he's doing. He heard about these ultimate Dragon Balls and realized that the danger would still be around as long as he was alive, so he's sacrificing himself to ensure the safety of the Earth. Well, you know, barring the fact that it's about to explode, but after that, you better believe it's gonna be safe. As Gohan starts to cry, Piccolo praises his strength and even commends the Kamehameha that hit him so hard. Would Gohan even know what he's talking about? Bluma had no idea why she was on another planet. Also, Piccolo, you're still bleeding from that? That was 2 months ago! How are you not dead already? And why would Piccolo have to hear about the Dragon Balls he made? Shouldn't he know? At any rate, the Earth explodes and Piccolo dies. For good. He doesn't ever come back to life. This is such an emotionally potent, but extraordinarily off-putting moment. I'm always desperate for real consequences in this franchise, but why here and why now? There is some logic to what Piccolo says, which is more than I can say for Goku when he decided to stay dead, but this is still completely random and the most off-the-point ending I've ever seen. Why is all the dramatic weight being hung on Piccolo of all people, a character who has barely existed in this story? I complained about Gohan suddenly being handed the reins in a story arc where he languished in the background, but that's nothing compared to this. This arc is 40 episodes long, and Piccolo has appeared in 2 of them, including this one. Now, I get why he's doing this, to a point. No one wants to go back out into space to collect the Dragon Balls because that wasn't received well. Even collecting them just to destroy them would be a massive undertaking and risk attracting the attention of new evil folks like Dr. Pooh and Toddler. But isn't there a dragon statue we could destroy? Shouldn't we have discussed our options? Normally I can overlook little lapses in logic for the sake of an emotionally consistent payoff, but this just feels like drama for the sake of drama. At best, I can say it's better served viewing it as a setup for something in future storylines, but that's really not how it plays here. But that's all the drama we have, because once all this hand-wringing and grieving is out of the way, the status quo is reset immediately. The Namekian Dragon Balls restore Earth, Trunks rebuilds Giru, and everybody has a party, the end. Wow, this wraps up so fast. But danger is on the horizon as the narrator points out there's something wrong with the Dragon Balls, the regular ones this time. Uh-oh. The baby arc is Dragon Ball GT at its best and brightest. And I'm not sure if I consider that a legitimate compliment or a backhanded one. But taking the first 40 episodes as a single storyline, which I do, they coalesce into something I find pretty enjoyable, at least in principle. And I think a lot of that has to do with its sense of movement. Honestly, I could do a whole video on this subject and how it applies, or doesn't, to Dragon Ball, and I might at some point. But it applies here. Stories thrive on movement, especially serialized stories. The plot needs to develop and change. The characters need to develop and change. While there might be an overall objective that consistently needs to be serviced, that objective can be broken down into individual beats, all of which represent evolving goals and natural reactions to new stimuli. The most exciting stories keep us on our toes. Given everything I've said about it over the years, you might find what I'm about to say shocking. but I think one of Dragon Ball's best examples of movement is the Cell arc. I'll give you a second to lift your jaws off the floor. Let's put aside for a minute all of its mind-boggling and inconsistent character decisions and just look at its structure. That is a storyline that is constantly evolving, constantly maintaining a good rhythm. We're training for artificial humans. Oh, we can't sense their ki! They absorb ki! They beat Goku! Vegeta beat them! Now it's a chase instead of a fight. We gotta find the lab. There are more artificial humans. They kicked our butts! It's time to regroup. Let's make some plans. Now there's a new threat. Quick, let's head back to the lab. Now let's try to track this bug man. He keeps slipping away from us, but at least we have these blueprints to help us. Oh, the artificial humans found us! There is a great momentum and pacing to all of that. I often hear that the Cell arc is a popular favorite of Dragon Ball fans. I also hear that everyone loves Dragon Ball for the fighting, and the story doesn't matter. But the Cell arc is not all fighting. The fights often last just long enough to turn the tide into the next big thing. It's just as much running and hiding, scheming and plotting on both the part of the heroes and villains. Who holds the cards, who can dominate, changes from moment to moment. There is a great balance of high-energy moments and quieter, more reflective scenes, to the point that neither dominates and neither overstays its welcome. The only time it really starts to drag is the section I affectionately nicknamed Endless Island Adventure. There is a lot of movement, be it narrative movement or just literal bopping around from place to place. Despite its myriad problems, it's easy to see why it's so engaging. To turn that around, it's the same reason why the Granola arc in Dragon Ball Super became such an incredible slog for me to get through. Its story and movement and exposition were completely front-loaded into the first few chapters, after which almost nothing changed or moved. It was all just an excuse to plop the characters into an empty field so they could fight uninterrupted for a solid year. And it was torture. I say all that because it forces me to ask, which of those two models does the Baby arc resemble? It definitely follows in the footsteps of the Cell arc. In both cases, that's because external pressures frequently force changes to happen, and as a result, both can be pretty messy. The Baby arc can be especially messy, as babies are wont to be. But I will argue it never gets boring. That's probably fairly controversial in and of itself. I know plenty of people who consider the entire first half to be boring, but I don't. Some of the individual destinations are duds, or full of dud-like sections, but they mostly manage to move on before they overstay their welcome. Again, it only takes 8 episodes before the series starts building towards the big bad. 2 of those episodes are the initial setup of the premise. That only leaves a handful of episodes of standalone adventures, all of which are entertaining enough. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, they're not great, but I've definitely sat through far more tedious Dragon Ball than this. I'm not here to be its champion, but it's fine. As I've pointed out, its transition between its two directions is handled relatively seamlessly, heavy emphasis on relatively. But it's definitely done in a way that builds momentum. I've praised this before and I will continue to praise it now. There's a fantastic build from whimsical Dragon Ball hunt, to uncovering a mystery, to getting the attention of a major bad guy, to said bad guy beating the heroes back to Earth. I love that structure. There's so much happening. As bad as some of the stops along the way are, as incomprehensible as some of the twists and exposition are, I do get excited being on this journey, seeing where it will pay off. So even if I do find myself disappointed that the original direction of the show is discarded in favor of reheated Z leftovers, I'm at least engaged in the evolution of the premise. I've already said that I feel that early Baby is Cell done right. I stand by that. Baby is presented as far more sinister, calculating, and inscrutable. Yes, he eventually shakes all of that when he gets in a position to flex his muscles, and yes, that is less interesting to me. But you want to know something? Even after he becomes the cackling brute with the hideous design, Baby is still one of the best villains in all of Dragon Ball. I'm not saying that in a relative sense. I'm not saying he's good by Dragon Ball GT's standards, although he is by far the best in that regard. I'm saying he's a great Dragon Ball villain, full stop. Even when the series tips completely into fighting, he never fully loses what made him interesting in the first place. It's never dwelled on, but he's still deliciously hypocritical, desperately conniving. There's rarely a moment when he's entirely in control of the situation. He's always having to sell out a little bit more of what he believes in to keep an edge over Goku. While his minions don't make a lot of sense, they do contribute some chilling moments. As they're never too far out of reach, they're always available to demonstrate that Baby doesn't deserve their loyalty. Do I wish this could have gone farther? Oh, definitely. It barely scratches the surface as far as I'm concerned. Baby starts fully evil, so it's not like he has to evolve anywhere. He just gets more obvious about it. I would love it if he was a little more morally gray so he could engender some self-reflection in the Saiyans. As I've said though, Goku is really the wrong character to place opposite Baby for that reason. Only Vegeta would have any reason to reflect, and he's taken out of the story entirely. I'd struggle to place Baby among the likes of Vegeta or Frieza as far as great Dragon Ball villains go, but he's leagues better than boring as hell Cell on his driving purpose of, I got nothing better to do. He's far more interesting than one-note Piccolo, who's only ever in it for the lulz. At least Baby has a motivation. As for the other characters, I feel I've already explored in detail what works or doesn't work about them. Goku remains steady. He doesn't particularly grow or change, but he is more interesting here than he's been in a while. I'm certainly in the minority, but I feel Trunks and Giru were wasted potential. I hate how pointlessly they were discarded. Pan is obviously a mixed bag. She's definitely the character with the strongest arc. The show just makes her so unlikable it's hard to care. But once they finally move her past her abusive tendencies towards Giru, she becomes much more tolerable. And even if she does primarily exist to be the damsel Goku saves, she still manages a strong presence in the latter stages of the arc. She is the audience surrogate character, and she fulfills that role well, much like her father before her. Due to the nature of the story, most of the rest of the characters are so underutilized that there's not much to say about them. I don't necessarily mean that as a bad thing. I said at the beginning I think it was a good idea to scale the cast back. Goten at least has a memorable episode, one that makes him the most interesting he's ever been. While it doesn't really tie into her character per se, it's wonderfully unsettling to see Bluma cast in the role as Baby's #1 fangirl and technical advisor. There's something so hard and sinister in this portrayal. It almost comes across like she believes in Baby's mission more than Baby does. Were this a real character and not the result of mind control, it might be even more compelling, but it is extremely entertaining nevertheless. Mr. Satan is a delight in this arc. He's fully made the transition into doting grandfather, so while his role was rather one-note, just fretting over his Pan-chan, it's rather adorable. And on occasion it's played for pathos. I love when he begs Mr. Boo to save Pan because with Videl gone, Pan's all he has left. When Satan thinks Baby has killed Pan, he screams at Baby to kill him too because there's nothing worth living for. He's a character who just keeps getting better and better. I love that even Goku calls him Grandpa Satan. It creates a wonderful contrast to see how Pan interacts with both of her grandfathers throughout this storyline. All that said, I've been pretty clear in regards to what I think the weaknesses of this arc are. I could list so many of them, from Pan's violence to her weird sexualization. There are the twists that aren't thought out that make no sense. Giru's and Baby's integration into the Machine Mutant storyline is a stretch at best. The ridiculously long chain of villains leading to Baby is a clear sign they were struggling to retool the story as they were going along. There's the return and waste of Oob, there's the return and waste of Mr. Boo, there's the return and waste of Piccolo. The entire final section of the final fight is just a long string of twists that make no sense. Again, it may sound like I've been going easy on it this video, but if you've been following from the beginning, you know how critical of it I can be. So, where is the disconnect? I feel I've been saying it a lot over the course of the past year. When I summarize the storyline of the Baby arc, it sounds brilliant. It does to me, at least. On paper, it mixes all of my favorite things about Dragon Ball. Growth, the passage of time, major change, light adventure, heavier emphasis on comedy, significant movement, a compelling villain, motivated fights that don't drag on too long, and one of the most meaningful transformations I've ever seen from this franchise. Dragon Ball GT arrives on the scene carrying the promise of a new frontier. I remember the first time I saw the opening to the show on that VHS fan sub I bought as a teenager. When I saw Goku, Pan, and Trunks fly toward the camera during the opening sequence with Don Don Kokoro blaring in the background, it gave me chills. To this day, I can't watch that without getting chills. It looked so fresh, so unique, so different from anything else I'd seen in Dragon Ball. It enticed me with the promise of the adventures of a third generation of Dragon Ball characters. Having now had nearly half a decade's worth of experience with the entire show, I can say it sometimes delivers on that promise. Sometimes, but not always. It talks a good game, promises a lot, but the devil is in the details. I have done my best to avoid a particular phrase while talking about Dragon Ball GT. I wanted my critiques to stand on their own, to not immediately fall into a common refrain that would flatten out the nuance of what I wanted to say. But now that we are here at the end of the story arc, I can't hide this from you any longer. If there is any unifying thesis to my critique of the baby arc, in the most general sense, it is that it has good ideas and bad execution. That's nothing new to add to the discourse, but I hope perhaps I've delivered it to you in a way that has caused you to think about it more deeply. The good ideas don't cause me to overlook the bad execution, but sometimes the ideas are great. Sometimes even the execution is good. And it's nothing if not ambitious, and sometimes that's just enough for me to appreciate it. I don't think there's any point in handing out scores when there are hardly any arcs at all. I've already said this is the strongest GT arc. I can't be any clearer than that, can I? I'll definitely be checking back in to let you know how the others stack up against each other. So that's Dragon Ball Dissection December for 2023. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you had a fantastic time. I can't believe how quickly 2023 went by. It's been crazy. In some ways, it has not been the best year. I've struggled to maintain views and channel growth. While the overwhelming majority of people I interact with here are amazing and always have been, I feel there's been a huge uptick in bullies and bigots in my mentions this year, which really weighed me down. I pushed myself way too hard with longer videos, bonus videos. I ran myself ragged, barely able to keep up the pace. And when I did have a huge newsworthy video, it somehow lost me subscribers. Lots of them. Somehow I've gotten sick 3 times this year. Although, well, a lot of you really seemed to like that last one. Thank you. Then I had multiple hard drive failures this fall, and I panicked that I had lost everything I used to make videos in the first place, while having to shell out tons of money to move past that catastrophe. You know what? Now that I list it all out, this year kind of broke me. But that's only viewing things from one perspective. It fails to take into account that when those hard drives did fail, Chaos of Seed of Might reached out to me to make sure I had access to their boffo release of Dragon Ball GT to use in future videos. It ignores how Kaiser Neko of Team 4-Star so generously sat down with me for a collab when I literally couldn't make anything else. I got to be in the room at New York Comic Con when a new Dragon Ball series was officially announced. Regardless of how well they did, I'm incredibly proud of the videos I made this year, the ways I pushed myself to step outside of my box. I put Mario through his own fashion extravaganza. I can't believe I made an hour-long analytical essay about how Anna Frank was adapted into film. I don't think I've ever been prouder of a video I've made. The people who watched it seem to agree. It was definitely worth the breakneck work sessions I put in to finish it on time. I'm always grateful I can bounce Japanese language questions off of Cypher and Saya Jedi, and of course I wouldn't be able to make Dragon Ball Dissection without Kanzenshu.com. And that's not even getting into all the wonderful friends in my day-to-day life who have helped me get over every hurdle this year and are always there for me. I'm always afraid to thank people because I feel like I'm going to fail to single out somebody who really deserves it, and so many people do. I'm grateful. I just want all of you to know that I'm grateful, that through it all, I've been very blessed to be here, to get to do what I love, to be supported by the wonderful patrons you see scrolling by right now. Thank you, everybody, for the wonderful community we have here. I can't wait to see you in 2024.